Good afternoon, everyone. Yay, that's better. So welcome to the special Saturday session. We started doing this like 3 weeks ago, so this is the fourth one because we decided that for Ajahn Brahm's 50th anniversary, the actual day will fall on the 5th of December. We decided to have 5 special events on Saturday where we will invite monks and nuns to give a short Dharma talk, share their experience when they, for example, live with Ajahn Brahm in the monastery, or what they have experienced from his teachings and things like that. So with today, we have invited Venerable Akincana. So Akincana is from Bodhiana Monastery, and I'll let him introduce himself. I am very pleased that Venerable Akincana is here, and that he has, not sure, did you volunteer yourself, or were you like appointed?
Ajahn Brahm asked me.
Which is very nice, because Ajahn Brahm has, basically I told Ajahn Brahm, I need 3 monks, and then he'll go and scout the monks for me. But sometimes when he approached the monks, they were like, nah, I'm not going to do it. But yeah, I was very grateful that Venerable Akincana agreed to be here today. And I'm very pleased that all of you are here today to show support for him. With that, let me hand that over to Venerable. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Leha. How close do I have to be for you to hear it? Pretty close. Can you hear me from here, or not really? A bit closer. Okay. Okay, how about that? Good? Good enough? Okay. If you can't hear me at any time, please just let me know, or somebody wave at me, and I'll figure it out, because I will move my head around a bit. So thank you for taking your time. I know everybody's busy, and it's a beautiful day outside. The jacarandas are in bloom. How lovely they are, and the sunshine is out there as well. So here you are in the sort of dimness of this hall, stuck with me, and I'm a fairly closer. Okay. Okay, thank you, Jeff. Okay. Leha. Okay, let me get closer as well. Okay, yeah, so the jacarandas are in bloom. It's a beautiful sunny afternoon outside. And yeah, thank you for coming. So you may have seen my topic. Ajahn Brahm and Leha kind of left it up to me, and I thought that, some of you may know that Ajahn Brahm likes to tell a joke now and again, So it's a bit his signature, isn't it? His sense of humor. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about what it's like to have a teacher, to be the disciple of somebody who teaches that way, right? Laughing wisdom is actually a term from the suttas. So I thought I'd start with that. It's actually, one of our teachers here has that name. I don't know if you know who that teacher is. Hasapanya, yes. Hasapanya is actually laughing wisdom, or quick wisdom sometimes, but Bhante Sujato translates it as laughing wisdom, and literally it means laughing wisdom. And in the suttas, it's ascribed to Sariputta. Interestingly, that Sariputta also has laughing wisdom, he has quick wisdom, he has different types of wisdom. So there are different types of wisdom. And I would say that Ajahn Brahm definitely, at least, has laughing wisdom, but I think his wisdom is a bit more profound and deeper than that. But it's something that allows him to connect with people very broadly, and certainly brings a lot of joy around the world to many of his disciples, including myself. But there are challenges, of actually having somebody who laughs so much and who likes to tell jokes and who likes to find the funny side of things on the path, especially if you're a disciple and you have your ups and downs, and the path is not always so easy. particularly when you try and commit to becoming a monk. And perhaps, so a little bit about myself. I'm a young monk. I've only done one reigns, which means I get to be called a young monk, which I really like because I'm 60 years old. And when you're 60, not many people call you young anymore. And so I always smile when people like the other monks say, the young monks have to do this and the young monks have to do that. And it like gives me a thrill, you know, because I'm young again, right? I have my second life. So I have been coming to Bodhinyana Monastery since about 2017. I used to live in Sydney. I'd lived there for more than 20 years, worked there, had a family, and then when it got to about 2015, I decided I'd wanted to quit and spend more time practicing and see whether I could ordain. And being a little bit old, it's a challenge because many people won't ordain you. And this is kind of Ajahn Brahm's great kindness, is to be open. Sometimes, you know, sometimes people in the monastery think, oh no, he's too kind that way, he's too open to anybody. And sometimes he jokes about that you know, some people are really just too crazy and he kind of has to send them off, but the rest he ordains. So, where are we in that, right? So, but yeah, I first came in 2017. I did a month, and I had a wonderful month as a guest. And I left Bodhinyana completely convinced that, you know, Ajahn had basically shown me that kindness is the solution to pretty much everything, actually. And I had spent a lot of my life feeling that, but having many people, including sometimes people in my family or my friends or certainly my colleagues, I worked in the financial industry, and many of those people thought that you have to be strict and disciplined and work really hard and things like that. But I always felt, no, that's not really correct. And after my first month at Bodhinyana, I thought, he's right. You know, he sort of had given me permission to just be kind with everything. And that was my starting point with him. And then, of course, I came back as a guest and did 2 years as an anagarika. I did 1 year before COVID. Then I left to help my family, and then I came back and did another year. And then I did a year as a novice, and I was ordained as a bhikkhu in May this year. So it's taken me about I've been his disciple for about 4 years. And at that time, I guess I have, through that journey, I have learnt a bit about Ajahn Brahm. I would never say that I know everything about him, not by any stretch of the imagination. But I do talk to some of the other long-term supporters who have been around, and they tell me a bit about how he's changed. And he himself talks about how he is less strict probably with people now. He's kind of more, again, that kindness and gentleness has become even stronger, I think. And I think I'm lucky because of that. You know, I enjoy it. And hopefully through the course of this talk, you'll also begin to see some of the things I've seen as a monastic about how he teaches and how his jokes, they are funny. I'll tell a couple of them, but not just to gratuitously kind of throw those out and fill time, but because Ajahn's jokes often have a much deeper meaning to them. And I think if you actually inquire into why he thinks they're funny, and you know what he's trying to tell you, then you can find there's actually very profound wisdom, and also something that actually tells you a little bit about his own character and his views of the world. Sometimes he's a bit more explicit, but what I have found is Ajahn's teachings are very subtle. He's teaching us all the time at the monastery, and if you are not quick, or if you're not listening to him, you can miss those teachings and you misinterpret them. But he's definitely teaching us all the time, especially as monastics, very gently And the interesting thing is he'll usually only suggest something to you at the moment, and quite gently and softly, and you can see him looking at you. And if you miss it and keep going on, I mean, because most of us, of course, are obsessed with what we're thinking and want a particular answer, Ajahn will actually just let it pass, which is really interesting. So you have to probably be a little bit quiet of yourself, in yourself, and you have to actually really be listening. Otherwise you will miss probably a significant amount of the direct teachings that he offers to us, because that is his style. And I think there's an element of that in his laughing wisdom, in his joking, in his jokes and his humor that he kind of hands to us, the gifts that he gives us, on a regular basis. At each talk, that become present and available to us. So I'll tell you a little bit about my own discovery about Ajahn humor, or my own reaction to it first, so you'll get a sense of perhaps who I am through that. And basically I became obsessed with making Ajahn laugh, myself, and I think there's actually quite a few monks who go through this cycle, that they kind of hope that Ajahn will be their friend, because he's very charismatic, he's so warm-hearted, so gentle and kind. And of course we have chosen him, we're his disciples, so we are really hoping that he will I want him to like me, for who I am, right? And I don't care about the others, it's me that I'm really interested in. So of course, and you see it, not all the monks do this, thankfully for Ajahn, but some of us do. And there's a particular expression on his face, that he gets used to it after a while. So I was obsessed pretty much the whole time I was an Anagarika. And unfortunately for Ajahn, I was an Anagarika for 2 years, not just one. So he had a very trying time. And every opportunity, and you don't get to be with him all the time, but in my interviews, if I was driving him and I sensed that he was willing to talk, sometimes he just wants to be quiet and you just leave him to be quiet. But pretty much all the time that I thought, I've got the stage, right? I've got the spotlight on me and I'm going to hit him with a joke, I couldn't make him laugh. He's actually not that easy. He's a very tough audience, Ajahn. You'd be surprised. You are surprised. I was shocked at how hard, and I hit him with pretty much every joke I had, and then I was scouring for jokes. Once I told him a fairly long-winded joke, and he said, "Oh, that's a terrible joke." I can't believe it, and at that I was very demoralized, and I thought, maybe I should give up. But there was still this obsession that I had, and I maybe my background or the kind of person I am, I wanted to find out, what is it? And so I ran through all the jokes I had that I thought were good, my long list of good jokes, nothing at all, and Ajahn would just kind of look at me patiently, slightly frustrated that I was using this valuable time that I had with him, even in interviews, to try and make him laugh. And he didn't laugh, And so finally, at almost the end, it took me 2 years, I finally made him laugh, and I haven't told him a joke since. I sort of learned something. I think partly because I was successful, I think that kind of allowed me to move on and understand that that's not really the relationship that I'm going to have with Ajahn Brahm, that his relationship to me is one as a friend, as teacher, not as a friend who's going to swap jokes, and not that kind of friend. And he cares for his disciples, he's training us, he cares that we make progress in the Dhamma, and he gives us a lot of freedom and space to try and explore our practice. But I don't know, do you want to hear the joke that I told him that made him laugh? So I tried a whole variety. One of the things I realized is Ajahn didn't really like long-winded jokes from me. And so I realized, okay, it has to be kind of very tight with a quick punchline. And it's a very British joke. I'm not even sure you're going to find it funny. In fact, I told it to Venerable Nibbutta, and he said he'll never laugh at that. He was like, no, he wouldn't find that funny at all. And I was just like, oh, you know, but it was my last shot. So the joke, here's the joke. I said, Ajahn, the last time I was in London, one of my friends there said, when you come, you know, there's a new restaurant that's opened in my neighborhood. It's called The Taste of the Raj. And I thought, oh, okay, you know, that could be good. And so he said, come over, we'll go and have some lunch and see what it's like, try it out. And so we went, and I said, Ajahn, it was terrible. You know, they beat us with these long sticks and forced us to build a really complicated railway. He laughed. He found that really funny, actually, and I got a really good ha-ha. And we were in the car driving the IMAX, and I was driving him to a house down, and I thought, that's it. I really got him. It was very natural, and he kind of kept chuckling for a while. And he actually said, can I use that? And I said, of course you can. So that was it. And then I sort of realized something, you know, about it. I thought, wow, how futile it was. I was a bit chuffed, of course. I sort of understood something about Ajahn through that process. And it's a clever joke. It's not my joke, by the way. It's a British comedian who I saw had told this joke. And I think it's kind of Ajahns sort of appreciation of what a joke does is it has misdirection. It's like a magic trick, isn't it? It sort of directs you in one way and then shifts you in another way. And in that instant, you are kind of caught in between. You're holding these two things in your mind. And when you get the joke, it's like a little bit of wisdom arises in your mind. There's insight, actually. Now, this isn't just something I'm saying because I think it's true. Personally, I believe that that's my experience. And of course, when you have that insight, you understand the funniness of it, the humor of it, you laugh. But science actually tells us that there's a whole process going on here, which there's been a few studies, and I'll tell you about those studies now, that I think in 2002, 2003, some scientists, I think, I can't remember what kind of scientists they were, but they had done a program where they had invited a number of very skilled meditators, including Mingyur Rinpoche. Does anybody here know about Mingyur Rinpoche? Mingyur Rinpoche is often on the circuit, the global circuit at the Buddhist conferences. Mingyur Rinpoche is there with Ajahn, actually. So Ajahn has met him, and he's very famous. He's younger. He's only, I think, in his 40s. He's obviously a Tibetan, and he lives in Kathmandu. That's where his main monastery is. I think he's the abbot of about 2 or 3. But I think maybe in 2000 and sometime in the 2000s, what Mingyur Rinpoche is really famous for is he was an abbot, then he ran away. So I told Ajahn that, and he was kind of looking at me thinking, oh, that could be a good idea. He ran away from being an abbot. He literally kind of secreted away a bit of money, you know, from people who had given him cash for his own things. He made a key to the gate at the monastery in Bodh Gaya, one of his monasteries in Bodh Gaya. It's an interesting story. And during the night, he unlocked the main gate. He didn't tell anybody, including his, he had minders. He's a very famous monk, and he's like one of these monks that comes from a long lineage of masters, right? And he's been meditating since he was a child, and he's ordained when he was a child. And he unlocked the door, took his bag. I think he was still in robes for the first part of his journey, and then he went to Gaya. I think he might have, I don't know if he booked a car. Anyway, he planned his whole escape. He'd been planning it for months. He didn't tell anybody. He just left them a note saying, I'm gone, don't try and follow me. And he spent, I think, more than something like 3 years. They couldn't find him. And what he wanted to do, why he ran away, is his whole life he had been sort of in the limelight. and his whole life he had been expected to become an abbot and a teacher, etc., because of his lineage, and he is a good teacher. You can check him out on YouTube, very charismatic as well. And, but he wanted to experience being like a sadhu. So he got rid of his robes, he went to Kushinara, sort of ditched his robes there, put on the robes of an Indian sadhu, and he ended up begging for food and traveling around North India for about 3 years before he came back. And his whole community lost contact with him. And when he came back, there's a writer who wrote the book about his initial part of his journey, which he almost died because he got food poisoning. The first meal that he had, that he begged, he got terrible food poisoning, and he almost died. And I think it was either a Thai or a Japanese man who had seen him in his robes and asked him some meditation questions, found him lying in a park, almost dead, and took him to get medical treatment. It's a very kind of dramatic story. Anyway, Mingyu Rinpoche was there in the early 2000s, and they said at that time, it's thought that Mingyu Rinpoche had already done something like 65,000 hours of meditation, right? So they got him into this lab, stuck electrodes onto him, and there were about 30 other people, 30 other skilled meditators, and they tested them. They asked them to do compassion meditation, then come out of meditation, etc., and they did different things to them, and then they read their brain waves, and what they found, which was really interesting, was the first time they've discovered this, is that these meditators had very high level and consistently high levels of gamma waves. So there's alpha, beta, delta, gamma, and theta, I think, waves. But gamma waves are very specific. I think alpha waves, the oscillation is moderately fast, and that's when you're thinking. So when your mind is actually active, and you tend to generate these alpha waves. Beta waves is you're sort of not thinking very much, your mind has slowed down, and so the oscillations are much slower. And I think theta or something like that is when you're virtually asleep. So the waves are very slow, they're kind of moving in a very slow oscillation. Gamma is the highest oscillation. And gamma waves generally, for most people, occur when they have sort of an insight, like, they give them things. When you solve a puzzle, or when an aha moment happens in your mind, we get the spike in our gamma waves, but it usually only lasts a second, sometimes only a split second, and it drops down again, and our mind goes back to being pretty normal again, the normal waves. And gamma waves are interesting is because they reflect almost multiple parts of your brain being engaged, right? So gamma waves also come when people have delight because they have memory of a taste. Say if they bite into a fruit that they really like a mango, and they are experiencing the taste of the mango, and at the same time they're also having a memory of a previous mango they've eaten, and it brings up this great pleasure. That's also when gamma waves trigger, right? So memories, actual sense contact, and so gamma waves, what they are characteristic of is multiple parts of your brain actually working together, which is really interesting because we also call samadhi unification of the mind, right? I'm not saying that the brain is the same as the mind, but it's interesting that that is sort of its seen function. So what happened with Mingyu Rinpoche and these other monastics is they found out that they have high levels of gamma waves all the time, even when they're sleeping. It's really interesting, much higher than regular people. And that when they asked them to focus on compassion, their gamma wave reading shot up multiple times compared to regular people. So they realized, wow, okay, this is the sign of a brain that's connected to a mind that is very adept at finding peace in itself and finding a place where it can be in stillness, and where probably what we would call finding samadhi, going into samadhi, right? that the signal reflecting samadhi is actually a gamma wave. And again, it's that almost whole of brain kind of focus or absorption into something that's very uplifting and insightful. So a 2013 study went on and they tested laughter. And they found that, yes, actually, laughter is, gamma waves shoot up when we laugh, when we have that insightful experience and pick up something, join the dots between a road we were traveling on and a different kind of result. We have this insightful thing that makes us laugh, and sure enough, the gamma waves spike up as well. And so now, then after that, they actually started talking about laughter as therapy. If you can't meditate, at least you can laugh, right? So hopefully that gives you a bit of a, the science is there, right? You can see actually Ajahn Brahm's laughing wisdom. The Buddha may have talked about laughing wisdom, and he probably knew about this 2,500 years ago. But Ajahn Brahm is fully aware of how much laughter not just kind of makes us happy in the moment, but it opens our hearts, as he has said to, I think, many times in many of his talks, that he said that actually it opens us up to different perspectives and seeing things in a different way. I mean, I know that he does his MC job very well when he kind of throws out a few jokes to test the audience and gather in your attention. But the laughter, I think, that is there to really open us up and allow us to accept the kernels of wisdom or the profound wisdom that he then provides to us as he goes into his talks. I'll go through a couple of jokes of his. And it's not just, as I said, I'm not just telling you them because I like them. I like many of Ajahn jokes. Actually, I pretty much laugh at all his jokes still. Because I just enjoy the way he tells them. I've heard them often many times. One of my favorite jokes of his is actually, it's a quick one, and he just says, what's the point of being humble if you can't tell everybody about it, right? I'm sure you've heard that. And it's one of those jokes that asks us to kind of look at ourselves, right? Because really, we say we're humble, but actually are we? So there's some wisdom in that. And so these two jokes I actually find are very profound, and they actually, to me, say a lot about Ajahn Brahm's style of teaching, some of his own philosophy of teaching. I think you can miss it if you kind of just, they are funny, of course. And one is, I'm sure you've heard this one, it's really about an elderly man who I think there's doing an article on him, and the journalists are asking him, how has it worked? What is the wisdom of having been married for 50 years? Right? I'm sure most of you have heard this joke. And they said, it's an incredible thing, especially in the present day, to have such a long-lasting relationship. What things made you? What allowed your relationship? What is the wisdom that allowed your relationship to work for 50 years? And he said, well, actually, I've only fought twice in my whole life, in that 50 years with my wife. And they said, well, that's amazing, like 2 fights. And he said, I figured it out really on a honeymoon, because we went to the Grand Canyon, and as people do, in those days, we hired a couple of donkeys, and we're taking the donkeys down into the canyon. And I was behind my wife, and the donkey she was on stumbled. And she kind of whacked it on the head, and she said, donkey, that's one. And so they went along, and it stumbled again, and then she was a bit kind of more upset and slapped it over the head and said, donkey, that's two. And then a bit further down, it stumbled very badly. I was a bit worried for both of them, and she didn't slap it on the head. She just got off, pulled a revolver out of her handbag and shot it in the head. And I was like screaming. I said, what are you doing? Are you crazy? And she looked at me and she said, husband, that's one. So, actually, what is Ajahn Brahm saying in that? Of course, it's pretty funny, right? We were expecting some deep, profound wisdom from this elderly man about what was happening, and yet really all we found out that his wife was pretty authoritarian, right? She was a very hard-liner. But actually, that is a kind of a criticism that Ajahn is giving about the way some people teach. Because you would actually find that he's not authoritarian at all, right? In fact, he says, I think he was just saying the other day that he doesn't like telling people off. He likes to find humor in the mistake or the error. And he says, yeah, just try not to do it again. But he really doesn't really like it. And I love that, of course. It's a wonderful thing to see in a human being, especially in this day and age. So actually, the joke is pretty funny, but he's kind of telling you that whole thing, there's no wisdom in that. Right? We were looking for wisdom at the start of that joke. We didn't find any wisdom in that. And he's kind of showing you that's what's funny about it, actually, that he's sort of showing you. I think that's why Ajahn Brahm finds it very funny, because the world looks for wisdom in those things of harshness or strictness or telling people off. And he's actually telling us through that joke that there's no wisdom in that at all. It's also very beautiful. I don't know if many of you picked that up, but again, I think that's actually why he finds that funny. And there is actually wisdom that Ajahn Brahm is telling you that he's chosen that joke in particular to put out there for you. Okay, and then there's, this is my favorite Ajahn Brahm joke. He hasn't told it for a long time, actually. That last one, I think he tells every so often, he resurrects it. This one, I haven't heard him really tell it for maybe a year or two, actually. It's been a while. So this one is about the young man who decides he's very fervent, and he's a Christian, and he's very committed to his path, and he joins a Christian monastery. It's a very strict monastery. And they have this rule that it's a silent monastery. You're not allowed to speak, but you can only speak once every 7 years. You can say something once every 7 years, right? But he feels that this will be very helpful to his practice, this young man. He's 21, as I said. And he comes in very committed, and he spends his first 7 years. And at the end of every 7 years, you get to go and see the abbot, and you can say something to the abbot. Whatever you want to say, right, after that, whatever you've learned in those 7 years of silence. And so he does that, and as the day is coming up, he's getting a bit excited about what he's going to say. He's thinking about, wow, okay, he's been silent for 7 years. That's a long time. Some people, 2 weeks, 9 days is very hard for many of us, right? 7 years is a long time, especially for a young man. And so he comes in, the abbot asks him to sit down, the wise abbot. And he looks at the abbot, and so the abbot says, what have you got to say? And he's been thinking about it, and he says to the abbot, the food here is terrible. And the abbot looks at him, and he says, okay, we'll carry on. And so off he goes, and he thinks, why did I say that? It's not at all what I wanted to say, it's like, so he goes away, another 7 years, he sits there, he does his thing, and there's times of great beauty, in those 7 years of his practice, great spiritual beauty. 7 years pass, so now he's 14 years, he's actually 35 years old now. And he comes back up to the abbot kind of sits him down, and he says, okay, what would you like to say? And he says, why do we have to do all the work? You guys don't do anything. And the abbot just says, okay, carry on. And this young, no, he's not so young anymore, and he's like, oh my God, that's 14 years, and that's what I could put out there. And you think all those ideas of how I was going to, stun the abbot with what beauty and my spiritual progress, they kind of went out the window. So he's there another 7 years, and he comes back. And this time he's like really trying to discipline himself, and he comes back. And the abbot says, okay, what have you got to say? And he says, you guys make all the rules, you never let us decide anything, I've had enough, I'm leaving. Right? And the abbot looks at him and he kind of nods his head and he says, I'm not surprised you're leaving. All you've done since you've come here is complain. So as a monastic, monastic jokes are few and far between, but, and of course as a monk, we're not really allowed to make jokes about the Buddha Dhamma Sangha, so that's why these are Christian people. But as a monastic, you can relate to that, right? Because you're really practicing, but where's the wisdom in that? Right? I think what Ajahn Brahm is telling you is that, we have these ideas in our practice about what we will achieve, what's going to happen in our retreat, or what's, all the things that we will experience, all the beautiful things that we will experience, how our hearts will open up, etc. And yet what actually happens is we get caught up in the grumbling and fault-finding, and that actually becomes the dominant characteristic of our experience. It's the thing that we are bringing into our mind a lot, and it then actually runs away with our life, in spite of the things we aspire to. So again, there's some really profound wisdom in that almost like we have to be very careful, to kind of reorient ourselves to come back to our aspirations or come back to what's really important to us, rather than get caught up in, feeling the food's not good, or, that there's too much work, or, that people are forcing you to do things, or, not giving you the space, they're not giving you what you want. The discontent effectively arises, and it's very hard to control. So again, very profound. And actually, those two things, I think, one, that Ajahn likes gentleness and softness, and sees great wisdom in that. And the other one, that to actually seek out to practice for contentment. Find the contentment in your practice, and that is really what you're looking for, rather than finding fault with things. So his jokes actually do carry, they are wise, if you are seeing the subtlety of it, and if you actually, I'm sure many of you have listened to many of Ajahn Brahm's talks, those are actually consistent themes in his talk that he brings up again and again. And so, maybe as we kind of go along, you understand that there's actually a bit more to his joking. There's often a great deal of wisdom in terms of underlying why he's chosen these things. And they reflect his actual, as I said at the start, I found it very difficult to make him laugh, and he's a connoisseur of humor. Actually, Ajahn Brahm, we know, is highly intelligent, and he actually has a very good taste in jokes, even though sometimes, you might think some of his jokes are, iffy, but yeah, he personally has very good taste, and I think that's actually why he doesn't really laugh when you tell him really silly or stupid jokes, unless he really wants to just make you feel good, but not for us monks, generally. And so the wisdom is there. And so lastly, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about where laughing wisdom, and coming back to the path, right? And so hopefully you're seeing a bit of it through those jokes and through what I've explained. But so the Buddha asks us to change our view about pretty much everything that happens in our mind. And Ajahn is giving us these jokes. He's actually training us, I believe, as we start to use humor, and as we laugh, and as we see those kind of shifts and changes, each time a joke comes, there's a bit of a change of perspective. You're being taken in one direction, as I say, and then when the punchline lands, there's a shift. Actually, your perspective has shifted slightly, and it's opened your mind, and actually the gamma waves have jumped up, and you've had a bit of insight, And so even to that extent, even if you've just laughed at his joke, some insight has arisen, and that laughing wisdom has landed and helped you along a little bit. Of course, the path is very profound, and so he's helping you that way, giving you an introduction into how you can use that joyful way, that laughter, that insightful laughter, to kind of help you reorient and take a different perspective. The Buddha is asking us for something very grand and profound. He's asking us to change our perspective on what we are and how we function and how we think. You know, the right view right at the start of the Noble Eightfold Path is really that, is to understand the Four Noble Truths, of course, but to understand these five aggregates and how they grasp at everything. Despite our best intentions, they grasp and they hold on. And that grasping and holding on to things is just occurring all the time. It never stops. It happens in our dreams. It happens when we're at work. It happens, you know, as we relate to people, as we experience frustration and great difficulty, as we get old and as we get sick, and when it comes time to die, and we're grasping. And it's not like we are doing it, the aggregates do it. It's actually, they just do it. That's actually their kind of, sort of the way that they operate, they grasp. And the Buddha is asking us to look deeply at these things, but not in a heavy way necessarily. Because actually, as he said to Pottapada, he said, when defiling mental states, which are grasping, when they are gone, in the Pottapada Sutta, he says, it shouldn't be thought that there's unhappiness left over. So when these states are gone, he said, there's incredible happiness, actually, that remains. He says there's mindfulness and clear comprehension, and these are incredibly happy states of mind when the grasping is gone. And so that's a difficult journey to make, to kind of keep looking at those things. And I think Ajahn Brahm is showing us a joyful way of doing it. I think years ago I read something, somebody had said that Buddhism is the serious pursuit of happiness. And at first I thought, oh yeah, maybe that's correct. But now I don't believe that that's the case at all, because that would make it a very heavy and sort of dry and almost painful path for us, right? But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's what the Buddha meant at all. I think there's so much joy to be experienced on the path, to be sharing this with the people around people here and around you. It's one of the, of course, one of the wonderful things about the monastic path is you live with people who are following this path and who are trying to find the joy in it. You know, and I think when people give up or find it difficult, they're not finding that joy for that moment. So sometimes even when I'm sitting and my mind isn't yet still, I do tell myself some of my jokes, because I think they're funny, but I also tell myself Ajahn Brahm's jokes too. And I start laughing as I'm sitting there, and often my mind settles as a result of that. So I'll stop now and take any questions if there are any, if there's time for questions.
Thank you, Venerable Akincana, for illuminating Ajahn Brahm's life, one aspect of his life like this, with his humorous aspects. You know as well, Ajahn Brahm is, his nickname in Sri Lanka is the Smiling White Monk.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
And there are books with the title like that. And the difference for him, Ajahn Brahm, to be popular in Sri Lanka, not only among the lay people, even among the monks and nuns there, is the light-hearted manner and the humorous way he approaches the Dhamma and teaching, and it hasn't reduced over the last 25 years that I know of.
Yeah.
And it's incredible. The attendance is not in hundreds, but thousands.
Yes, yeah, wonderful.
And I think the key is this humor.
Yeah.
His humor and the kindness, of course, as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Definitely.
it really
it's
sells Dhamma.
Sadhu.
Thank you.
Sadhu.
I just want to find out more about yourself.
Okay, yeah.
I wanted to ask you what inspired you. Was it your ancestral people are you Sri Lankan? Are you ancestrally Buddhist?
Yep.
Were there examples in your family or in your village that led you to really want to be a monk?
Okay, I am Sri Lankan, but my family's Catholic. So I converted in 1996, but I had been reading before then. I suppose so, and I had wanted to become a monk from probably about 2003, but I had family obligations, etc. So it took a while. The more I read, and I suppose I had an experience when I was quite young, and it was about 17 or 18, that changed my sense of, probably changed my direction of my life a bit, that it made me feel more connected to my heart, and changed my view of rationality. At that stage I was at university and I was quite a rational person. I felt that I was quite rational anyway. And I was very much, I did like philosophy and sciences, and I was an economist as well, so I was studying social sciences and stuff. And, but an experience I had really shifted that. It opened my heart up a lot, and I kind of felt that there's something else that happens. There's more to being a human being than just thinking. You know, that was quite a significant change in me. And from that point on, I was kind of looking around. But I went down that route of, studying philosophy, reading philosophy, trying to find different things. And perhaps because I never really, even when I was a child, I never found Catholicism very kind of appealing. I think I thought there must be something else, and maybe there were wise people. But then I started reading. I was living in London at the time, and I read a book about the Buddha. And it took me a long time, because by then I was in my late 20s. And I was very intrigued, and then I started reading more Dharma books, etc. And the more I read, the more sense it made to me. And I liked the sort of reasonableness, the sort of rational explanations involved, but I also liked the kindness. And I've mentioned earlier that I felt I was always, I kind of was drawn to kindness a lot as a young person, and I just found it a nicer way of being, and I found the kindness very, very important for me. And then as I made contact with Buddhists, I found them pretty kind, mostly. And then, of course, and also that they like laughing. So, of course, you can probably tell, I also like telling jokes, and I like laughing. I've always enjoyed that. I've always preferred comedies to dramas, when I've watched things. So I think those things drew me in. And as I said, the more I read, the more it made sense, and the more as I practiced, the more it changed my life. So I realized that yes, this really works. And by about 2003 or so, after practicing for some time with Bhante Sujato in Sydney, and Bhante Mahinda as well, I felt that actually I really wanted to keep going with this. Actually, I made the commitment to myself that whether lay person or monk, I would keep practicing until the day I died.
I'm also the similar age to you.
Yeah.
Around the same time, Sri Lankan Catholic, born
Yeah.
Catholic. Some of it didn't make sense, so converted to Buddhism. But of course, you can't become a nun when you're older.
Well,
so you're very
maybe,
lucky.
Maybe. Actually, my wife, my ex-wife, I should say, is in the process of becoming a nun. She is due to be ordained in February, and she is actually slightly older than me. So yeah, don't necessarily give up.
Venerable, this is not a question,
All right.
but I would like to further comment, on Ajahn Brahm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
In the last 2-3 weeks, I think 3 or 4 times now, I've commented on Ajahn Brahm's character, his teachings, his knowledge of the Dharma, and his popularity, okay?
Yeah.
So what I haven't covered now is his duties, his establishments, and his overseas contact.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as a monk, Ajahn Brahm has done a lot of duties, home visits, funeral services. Okay, like when people have trouble, they go to see him for advice. Whatever you think of duties, he has fulfilled that. Okay. Yeah. Next, his establishments. Okay, he's established. We know Jhana Grove. We know the eastern states, Victoria, New South Wales, Buddhist centers, the nuns, Dhammasara Monastery, Great Southern, and he's conducted many retreats too, yeah, where people from all over the world come, to Jhana Grove, yeah. And also the next one is his overseas establishments, okay. So, I mean, here, okay, we have people from, especially the Rains Retreat, people from all over the world. They have to book, I heard 2 or 3 years in advance to come, For example, people from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Singapore, Hong Kong, and Western countries, they come. Yeah. You see what I mean?
Of course.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
His reach
so
is
what I
very
mean
broad,
is
yeah.
I really can't think, of any monk, who has done so much achievements in the life,
Yeah. Yeah.
I can't think, except for the Dalai Lama, but that's then Vajrayana is a different one.
Of course, yeah. Within Theravada, definitely.
He's done so much.
Yeah.
And then the books he writes too.
Yeah.
Countless books, Even last night, I gave a lift to someone back. They bought Ajahn books, 4 or 5 books, this person.
Yeah, I know. We're in awe in the monastery of how hard Ajahn Brahm works.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. It's actually a bit scary, because I think he's going to do 50. This is his 50th. I've done 1 Rains. This is 50 Rains, and it's a bit daunting, I think. I personally try not to try. There's not, given I'm at the stage of my life that I am, it's hard to imagine doing something similar. So you're right. It's exceptional, Ajahn Brahm, and he's given us so many blessings through the hard work, and he keeps working very hard, even now, as his attendant. We do actually ask him quite often to take more retreat time, etc., but he's very reluctant. I suppose he feels very committed. He does feel, I don't have to suppose, he feels very committed to the lay people, the lay supporters, each monk and nun, all the disciples. And you can see him when he's talking to people that he's so present when whoever it is comes up to him, say after lunch, and he's there. When he's at the monastery, it's incredibly rare for him not to be up at the Dhanasala after lunch, open, to anybody who comes with all kinds of issues or, questions, and he will just really focus on them and be completely attentive and offer them advice or guidance or support. It's really a remarkable thing to see. So he's very special, Ajahn Brahm. And we're, I think most of us, or I certainly feel extremely lucky to be his student.
Maybe 3 loud sadhus to Venerable Akincana for the wonderful talk today. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leah.
I think we can pay respects to the Buddha, and then we can pay respects to you.